What kind of band could make Prince a man who could outsing, outplay, outdance, and outproduce almost anyone alive, look at their music and quietly decide, no, this is not it? Prince was not just another superstar with opinions. He was a full musical universe packed into one body. Funk, rock, soul, pop, gospel, jazz, rebellion, sexuality, mystery, and perfectionism all fighting for control. He did not simply listen to music. He judged it like a master craftsman inspecting a fake diamond under purple light. And that is what makes this story dangerous. Because Prince did not always attack directly, he did not need to. Sometimes a cold backstage refusal said more than a full interview. Sometimes a cover version irritated him more than an insult. Sometimes another band's success seemed to represent everything he believed was going wrong with modern music. And sometimes, the silence around a feud was louder than the feud itself. Prince believed music had to have blood in it. It had to breathe. It had to risk embarrassment, danger, weirdness, seduction, and truth. If a band sounded too manufactured, he heard the machinery. If they copied without understanding, he heard the theft. If they took rock, funk, or soul and made it safe, shiny, or empty, Prince seemed to take it personally. So tonight, we are counting down 6 bands Prince reportedly disliked, rejected, mocked, or quietly pushed away. Some were global legends. Some were hit-making machines. Some were close enough to his world that the tension cut even deeper. And one of them might shock you, because it was not just about hate. It was about history, influence, ego, and Prince's lifelong war against music that forgot its soul. Number 6. The Flaming Lips. The Flaming Lips are one of the strangest bands to appear in Prince's orbit, because on the surface, they were not the obvious enemy. They were not a polished pop factory. They were not trying to out-funk him. They were not wearing his sound like a borrowed purple coat. They were experimental, psychedelic, weird, and proudly outside the mainstream. In another universe, you might imagine Prince respecting their refusal to be ordinary. But that is what makes this reported snub so fascinating. The story goes that at the 2006 Brit Awards, the Flaming Lips tried to pass some of their CDs to Prince through his bodyguard. For most bands, getting music into Prince's hands would have felt like sending a prayer into the sky. But according to the legend, the CDs came back. Prince allegedly did not want them. No dramatic speech, no public insult, just rejection. And with Prince, that kind of rejection could feel colder than a feud. The Flaming Lips built their career on eccentricity, colorful chaos, surreal stage shows, and a kind of strange emotional psychedelia. But Prince's weirdness came from a completely different place. His strangeness was controlled. Every sound, every look, every chord, every scream, every pause had intention behind it. He could be wild, but he was never random. That may have been the difference. The Flaming Lips embraced mess. Prince demanded precision. That reported CD rejection says something important about Prince's standards. He was not impressed just because a band was unusual. Weirdness alone did not earn his respect. You had to be dangerous and disciplined. Strange and exact. Free, but still musically undeniable. So the Flaming Lips land at number 6 not because Prince launched a public war against them, but because the snub feels perfectly Prince. A band offers him their music, hoping for curiosity. Prince sends it back like a sealed verdict. No explanation needed. In his world, not every strange band was genius. Some were just noise-wearing costume jewelry. Number 5, Maroon 5. Some bands reportedly irritated Prince because of attitude, some because of fame, some because of what they represented. But Maroon 5 got themselves into Prince's danger zone for one very specific reason. They touched Kiss. And for Prince fans, that is not a small thing. Kiss is not just one of Prince's biggest songs. It is a masterclass in restraint. The genius of that track is not only what Prince put into it, but what he left out. The groove is lean, the rhythm is sharp, the vocal floats like a secret. The whole song feels like it is dancing in an empty room, daring you to fill the silence. Prince understood something most pop bands never learn. Sometimes the sexiest thing in music is space. So when Maroon 5 covered Kiss, they were not simply paying tribute. They were walking into one of Prince's sacred rooms and changing the furniture. Their version added pop rock polish, more fullness, more radio-friendly texture. For casual listeners, that might have made the song easier. Bigger, smoother, more familiar. But to Prince, according to reports, that was exactly the problem. The original Kiss worked because it refused to be obvious. It teased, it snapped, it stripped everything down until only the nerve remained. Maroon 5's version filled the silence Prince had carefully carved out. That is why the criticism felt so believable. Prince was famously protective of his work, not just legally but spiritually. He did not like covers that failed to understand the soul of the original. To him, a cover was not karaoke with better equipment. It needed a reason to exist. It needed to reveal something new or bow deeply to what was already there. Maroon 5 were already a massive commercial band when they recorded it. That may have made it worse. This was not some small garage group accidentally mishandling a classic. This was a major hit-making machine, turning one of Prince's most minimal masterpieces into something more ordinary. And that is why Maroon 5 belongs here. They did not just cover Prince, they misunderstood the part of Prince that mattered most, the power of what he refused to play. In Prince's Purple Kingdom, if you could not respect the silence, you had no business touching the groove. Number 4. The Black Eyed Peas. If Prince believed music needed soul, danger, sweat, and human electricity, then the Black Eyed Peas represented one of his biggest nightmares about the future. Pop music built like a product launch. This does not mean the Black Eyed Peas had no talent. They knew how to make hits. They understood hooks, repetition, club energy, global choruses, and stadium-sized simplicity. Their songs could turn into chants. Their beats could invade parties, commercials, weddings, sports arenas, and radio playlists everywhere. By the late 2000s, they were not just popular, they were almost impossible to escape. And that may have been exactly what Prince disliked. For Prince, a song was not supposed to feel like it had been assembled in a boardroom. Even when he used drum machines, synths, and futuristic production, he made technology breathe. His machines still sounded dirty, private, human, and alive. The Black Eyed Peas represented a different kind of future, shiny, compressed, quantized, massive, and built for instant impact. Every beat hit hard. Every chorus was designed to explode. But Prince seemed to believe that if the soul was missing, size meant nothing. The alleged idea that their music sounded like a marketing meeting captures the criticism perfectly. It was not that Prince failed to understand why they were successful. He understood too well. Their music was efficient. It moved crowds. It sold. It traveled. It worked. But to Prince, working was not enough. A song could work and still feel empty. The Super Bowl comparison makes the divide even sharper. Prince's 2007 halftime show became legendary because it felt like something no machine could manufacture. Rain fell, the guitar screamed. Purple Rain became almost supernatural under the storm. The Black Eyed Peas later represented a brighter, more digital, more choreographed kind of spectacle. Huge, colorful, commercial, and futuristic, but not magical in the same dangerous way. For millions, the Black Eyed Peas made fun party music. But Prince was not grading fun, he was grading soul. And in his world, if the machine did not have a heartbeat, he could hear the emptiness immediately. That is why they rank so high. They were not just a band Prince reportedly disliked. They were a symbol of an age where pop music could be optimized, branded, polished, and blasted around the world even if the human pulse underneath was fading. Number 3, The Time. Now this one cuts deeper, because the Time were not outsiders. They were not strangers trying to copy Prince from a distance. They came directly out of his world. Their sound, their attitude, their early identity, and their rise were tied to Prince's creative machine so tightly that the tension almost feels like family betrayal. And family feuds are always the ugliest. The Time were formed in the early 80s with Morris Day as the unforgettable frontman, but Prince's fingerprints were all over their beginning. Behind the scenes, he wrote, produced, arranged, and shaped much of their early material. The band became a funk powerhouse, stylish, funny, arrogant, slick, and dangerously charismatic. On stage, they were not just musicians, they were characters. They had attitude, they had swagger, they had humor, They had that Minneapolis heat, but that also created the problem. The time became so good, so entertaining, and so beloved that they sometimes threatened to steal attention from Prince himself. In Purple Rain, they were positioned as rivals, but that rivalry was not only fiction. The energy felt real because there was real creative tension underneath it. The time could make crowds laugh, dance, and scream with a looseness that contrasted Prince's intense perfectionism. Morris Day had a showman's smirk that could challenge Prince without even trying. Prince reportedly had a complicated relationship with the band's independence. He helped create them, but he also controlled the system around them. And when members of the time wanted more freedom, more credit, or more space to become their own creative force, the tension grew. That is what makes this entry different from the others. Prince did not dislike the time because they lacked talent. He may have disliked them at moments because they had too much talent and because that talent wanted to escape his shadow. There is also something psychologically fascinating here. Prince built the time like a rival he could control. But once the rival became real, control became harder. That is a classic Prince contradiction. He wanted excellence around him, but excellence had to orbit his sun. So the time earns number 3 because their conflict was not about bad music. It was about ownership, ego, control, and creative power. They were one of the few bands close enough to challenge Prince from inside the Purple Empire. And sometimes the band you create can become the band that threatens you most. Number 2, the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones land near the top because this was not just a music disagreement. This was humiliation, history, and rock and roll tribal warfare. Early in his career, Prince opened for the Rolling Stones. On paper, it should have been a breakthrough moment. A young, fearless, genre-blending artist standing in front of one of the biggest rock audiences in the world. But the crowd was not ready for him. Prince came out in his bold, provocative style with the kind of stage presence that made no apology for sexuality, funk, and theatrical danger. And some Rolling Stones fans rejected him brutally. He was booed. Things were reportedly thrown. The audience did not just fail to understand him. They pushed back against him. For a young Prince, that kind of rejection had to burn. And it was not simply about one bad opening slot. The Rolling Stones represented a certain kind of rock establishment, gritty, legendary, rebellious, but also protected by a tradition that Prince was never going to fit neatly into. They were classic rock royalty. Prince was something stranger, too funky for rock purists, too rock for soul traditionalists, too sexual for polite audiences, too brilliant to ignore. He did not belong to their temple, and maybe that was the point. The tension becomes even more interesting because Prince later proved he could out-rock many artists who once dismissed him. His guitar playing, stage control, and command of genre eventually made the old categories look small. But early Rolling Stones audiences saw the clothes, the attitude, the shock, and maybe missed the genius underneath. That experience helped shape the mythology. Prince was not just fighting for applause. He was fighting against the entire idea that rock belonged to one type of performer. The Stones crowd may have thought they were rejecting an opening act. In reality, they were rejecting the future before they understood it. So why are the Rolling Stones at number 2? Because for Prince, they were connected to one of his most painful early lessons. Greatness does not always get recognized by the crowd first. Sometimes the crowd laughs before history corrects them. And Prince never forgot people who failed the test. Number 1, the Beatles. At number 1, we have the most shocking band on the list, because almost every musician is expected to bow before the Beatles. They are treated as sacred, untouchable, the band that changed everything. For many artists, praising the Beatles is almost mandatory, but Prince was not built for mandatory worship. Prince's relationship to the Beatles was complicated. He did not necessarily deny their importance, but he pushed back when critics tried to connect his work too easily to theirs. When people compared Around the World in a Day to Beatles-style psychedelia, Prince rejected the idea. He did not want his music reduced to someone else's shadow, even if that shadow belonged to the most famous band in history. That is what makes this so powerful. Prince was not simply saying the Beatles were bad. He was saying, do not explain me through them. For a genius like Prince, influence was a dangerous word. He knew every artist came from somewhere, but he hated lazy comparisons. His music blended funk, rock, R&B, gospel, jazz, new wave, soul, and pure Minneapolis imagination. So when critics heard colorful psychedelia and immediately reached for the Beatles, Prince seemed irritated. Not because the Beatles had no value, but because the comparison made his own invention feel smaller. And that was never going to work with Prince. The Beatles represented the ultimate rock canon. They were the band everyone was supposed to admire, study, and reference. But Prince's entire life was a refusal to stand in line. He did not want to be the next Beatles, the next Hendrix, the next James Brown, or the next anyone. He wanted to be Prince, a category of one. That is why the Beatles become the perfect number one. They symbolize something bigger than a band. They symbolize the music industry's habit of measuring every genius against old monuments. Prince did not need permission from those monuments. He was building his own. And there it is, 6 bands Prince reportedly disliked, rejected, resisted, or refused to be defined by. The Flaming Lips represented weirdness without the kind of precision Prince demanded. Maroon 5 represented covers without understanding. The Black Eyed Peas represented pop as corporate machinery. The Time represented the rival Prince created and struggled to control. The Rolling Stones represented the rock establishment that once failed to recognize him, and the Beatles represented the shadow of musical history he refused to live under. Prince was not always fair. He was not always gentle. But he was consistent about one thing. Music had to be alive. It had to risk something. It could not be fake, empty, borrowed, overproduced, or worshipful just because critics said so. So maybe the real question is not which bands Prince hated most. Maybe the real question is this. If Prince were alive today, listening to modern music, how many bands would survive his judgment? And more dangerously, would your favorite be one of them?